everyone, welcome to another video log for my upcoming book, The Four Global Truths. Today I want to talk a little bit about suffering, and I'm going to divide this topic really into two different parts, which we could say are the good news and the bad news. First, the good news, which is my way of clearing up the misconception that Buddhism is somehow inherently negative or pessimistic in nature, which I don't think it is. And I think this misconception comes from the usual translation of the Buddha's first noble truth, which I talked about on the first previous video log. And this first noble truth is usually translated as the truth of suffering. Now this word suffering comes from the Pali word dukkha. And Pali is a vernacular of Sanskrit in which all of the early scriptures of Buddhism were written. And this word dukkha, it does apply to gross forms of physical suffering that you might think correspond with the word suffering, like ailments and disease and broken bones and all that. But it also applies to something much more subtle and psychological in nature, which I've heard the translation anxiety or stress for dukkha, which to me makes much more sense. And I've heard the word upset. And of course upset can apply to something very acute or something very mild. And in the book I use the translation dis-ease, which can apply to disease, but also a dis-ease or an unease in one's way of being. So if we look at the etymology of the word, it's even more revealing. The word dukkha has two parts. Ka is the root word, and ka means basically something like space. And du is a negative prefix, which means something like crowded or contracted or a disharmonious kind of space. And we can contrast this with another Pali word, sukha. Su has the prefix, is a positive prefix, which means something like open or flowing or harmonious or spacious. So really you can think of the whole of the Buddhist path as moving from dukkha to sukha. It's moving from a sense of constriction and crowdedness to a sense of openness and freedom. And I came across an interesting Wikipedia article on dukkha that has a quote that I would like to read for you. It's from an author, I think his name is Winthrop Sargent, and he was quoted in one of Houston Smith's books on comparative religion. And the quote is this: "It is perhaps amusing to note the etymology of the words sukha and dukkha. The ancient Aryans who brought the Sanskrit language to India were a nomadic horse and cattle breeding people who traveled in horse or ox-drawn vehicles. Su and du are prefixes indicating good or bad. The word ka, in later Sanskrit meaning sky, ether, or space, was originally the word for whole, particularly an axle hole of one of the Aryans' vehicles. Thus, sukha meant originally having a good axle hole, while dukkha meant having a poor axle hole, leading to discomfort." So a more modern analog might be something like, imagine having a shoe that doesn't quite fit and it just literally rubs you the wrong way when you're walking. So this is one way to conceive of the word dukkha. And hopefully all of this will give you a better sense of this Pali word dukkha and the word suffering and how they may or may not be related. So I hope that clears up something, and I hope you'll stay tuned also for the next version of my talk on suffering, which addresses some of the very real forms of suffering that are happening now here on planet Earth. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Have a great day.